Thank you so much, Gabi, and hi everyone. Welcome to our discussion about cracking the authoritarian playbook. And many thanks for showing up in our panel in the afternoon of the last day of a conference. So I assume you are all pretty much invested in media freedom. My name is Gülsin Harman. I am an Istanbul-based freelance journalist for the New York Times and BBC. I'm also working as a media development consultant for the Turkish independent newsrooms, focusing on the editorial strategy and methods to increase their impacts and deepen their audience engagement. Today, I'm immensely proud to lead a conversation among highly esteemed colleagues from Georgia, Hungary, the US, and Serbia upon the invitation of the IPI for sure, and many thanks again for hosting us. Our panel will look into the state of journalism in countries going through an undemocratic slide, or even worse, as we will discuss, and explore the feasible remedies, such as strategies and tools that could be hopefully replicated in our countries and in your countries too. We will do 2 rounds of questions, and I will, if time allows us, I will open the floor to questions in the last 10-15 minutes. I'll briefly introduce the panelists as we go along with the questions. So first, we will start with the last night's awardees, and I will address to dear Tamar. Yesterday evening, you accepted the IPI IMS World Press Freedom Hero Award on behalf of Mizia Amaglobili with a very moving speech. And following her imprisonment early this year, you stepped in to become the deputy director of Gazeti Batumelebi, one of Georgia's leading media organizations. So for me, watching Georgia from Turkey, it is impossible not to notice some similar patterns of the crackdown on media. Yet there is also very vibrant public protests and people demanding to exercise their rights and to maintain the pluralistic voices within Georgia. And again, as I said, watching from Turkey, in hindsight, one of my sincere, truly sincere regrets, as a journalist in Turkey, more and more I realized that we were not able, for ample reasons, we were not able to persuade the public that the very essence of journalism as a job is about serving them and ensuring that their very personal and vital rights are safeguarded within a society. In a sense, again, talking from a Turkish perspective, we could not rally them around the cause of journalism, the idea of journalism being a personal value affecting their immediate life. So in that perspective, I'm curious that how your organization ensures that the audiences, its own audience, its own readership, understand that why Gazeti Batumelebi should survive and must survive, and in that understanding how they contribute, could be also financial contributions or forming a community, how they ensure that your organization survives. And do you believe that, it's a very sincere question again coming from me, do you believe that the public in Georgia truly understand and appreciate why Mizia is in prison? And do they connect her imprisonment to very much their own identity?
Thank you. The thing is that this situation, overall situation in Georgia, and mainly what has been happening since November 2024, since the Prime Minister of Georgian Dream announced that Georgia is suspending negotiations with the EU and people took on the streets, the polarization in the country has deepened as well. And as we are speaking about supporters of Batumelebi and Netgazeti, our media outlet, and also supporters of independent media, this is part of the public which is very critical toward the government, which is in the streets, standing there, I mean, since November 2024, like more than 300 days now, and part of the public that refuses to give up, give in, to surrender, and still, despite of fines, despite of imprisonments, they are still standing there. They still continue these protests. So main supporters of independent media, of Batumelebi and Netgazeti and Mzia as well, are these people. And Mzia's imprisonment, of course, somehow changed this, not attitude, I wouldn't say that it changed some attitude towards Batumelebi and Netgazeti or independent media, but it somehow made people realize what independent media means and how important even smallest online media outlets can be for a country and for the community. So Mzia has huge support inside the country. This, I mean, international recognition, Press Freedom Hero Award, Sakharov Award, other awards, of course, also influence this, support Mzia, but she's become like kind of a symbol for press freedom and these fights that's happening in Georgia. She's quite often referred as a conscience of Georgian media because, you know, today everyone is looking up to her, not just journalists and media workers, but other political prisoners and other protesters. Her words and her, image is everywhere on poster banners, on murals. She has become this kind of a symbol, and support there is somehow means support to independent media at the same time. So the situation somehow itself, we haven't worked for it. It happened this way that this part of the public which is critical is supporter of independent media, and the other part of the public which is loyal to the government, on the other hand, they are openly hostile toward us, toward journalists, toward media workers, because we see every day how they attack journalists on the streets, and there are, zero investigations and zero individuals, held accountable. But we have cases when journalists were beaten so severely that they are just lucky to be alive because it was intended to kill them. So that's the situation.
Definitely. Thank you, Tamar. And next is another awardee, this time as a cohort. Marton Gergely, he's the editor-in-chief of Hungary's largest current affairs weekly, HVG. And last night, the Hungarian independent media as a cohort received the 2025 IPI IMS Free Media Pioneer Award, and I quote, "in recognition of their innovation, adaptation, and endurance under sustained political and economic pressure." Again, every time as a Turkish journalist, every time I look into the work of my Hungarian colleagues, I am genuinely fascinated by their energy to innovate, their motivation to keep up, and by their energy to innovate, I mean a whole spectrum of innovation, from collaboration across newsrooms, experimenting with revenue models, developing news products to turn their readerships into committed members of a community. So again, like Hungary, Turkey, and all of our countries have been discussed for so long in many contexts, but my very direct question would be like, where is this motivation? Determination to deliver quality journalism comes from, and how it's maintained and communicated so truly with the public. So what did Hungarian independent journalists did right in that regard, and how they efficiently adapted in the aftermath of a media capture? Because in Turkey also we had a very violent media capture, and a lot of journalists really struggled to find their footing in the completely wrecked ecosystem.
Well, I'm usually not that optimistic, but I'll try to give an optimistic version. I think Hungarian media outlets were under immense pressure from 2010 as Orbán took over with a supermajority and started his illiberal state rebuilding. And it started with the total demolition of the public broadcast, and started with long-term projects, buying up media outlets one by one, turning it into propaganda channels or shutting them down. My newspaper was shut down after a hostile takeover, Népszabadság, but 2 years before, a German company was pushed so far that they fired the editor-in-chief, so they seized one of the big news portals. Another big news portal was seized 4 years later. And yes, a lot of esteemed colleagues found ways of opening up new media outlets. So there are a lot of great and inspirational outlets. There's one which survives only on YouTube. There are the ones who are smaller investigative projects, and also a huge portal was built from scratch in the last 5 years, Telex. Or that a big tabloid news portal managed to build a serious news business and serves Hungarian public interest right now. But at the same time, we also have seen that the netto game was always won by the Hungarian government. So that the newspaper was shut down and the new newspaper was opened up, but there were less readers. Portal was taken over, so a new portal was made, but that what the old staff has built is now serving propaganda, so that the spaces have narrowed down, and there's this hard feeling we had for long that we exist because they can afford us politically, because we are in the European Union, because they have achieved a bigger bubble under which they have gathered all their voters, and we don't count. That what we do is quality journalism, is impact reporting, but our impact has been so minimalized that we don't make a difference. We exist, but we don't really matter. So if the question is how we survived, I always say with idealism and stupidity. And you have to be idealistic or stupid, and actually it only goes if you are both. Because there are times when the only way forward is that you are just stupid enough to stick to the job. And then again and again, there are tons of events where you see that you are needed. You are needed in the first months of COVID, when the Hungarian public knows that they are lying to us, so they come to see what's the truth. And then you don't have the facts, and after a few months, they turn to the propaganda because that's the better version of the truth. And we are, without having the facts, only somehow, raising questions without answers, and we are part of the anxiety the whole society feels. And then again, only stupidity helps you to keep to the next time you are needed.
I wouldn't call that stupidity, but commitment.
Yeah, all right, let's call it commitment. Thank you very much.
Talking about stupidity and being committed to journalism, even though the conditions are getting harsher and harsher, you said stupidity, but I will always remind myself and just say it here also, I will say a quote from Antonio Gramsci, that I'm a pessimist because of the intelligence, but I'm an optimist because of will. So, but I understand the knowledge with being stupid and still continuing journalism. It resonates with me. And talking about the change of a media landscape, we have to go to John, and we have to go to the US. And first and foremost, since I known you for years as an IPI member. Like, if someone told you 10 years ago, John, that you will be on a panel in an IPI Congress with a title containing the word authoritarian, yet you will be talking about the US, and then what would be your reaction 10 years ago? And this question was on my mind, this 10 years question, not because in last night's ceremony, Marty Baron said, until a decade ago, I took for granted that we would always have a free press in the United States. I will no longer take for that granted. So in connection to this 10 years speculation, like, do you share his opinion, and do you think that the American journalistic community as a whole is meeting the moment, fully grasping like what could be ahead and what is changing?
Well, first of all, I would not have believed 10 years ago that the situation would be as dire as it appears to be today. We've always had the umbrella of the U.S. Constitution and the First Amendment that enshrines the principle of freedom of the press and freedom of speech. For the first time in American history, except maybe arguably in time of war, there's been real threats to this. But what makes me a little optimistic is this history of the United States, and the fact that I'm convinced for the vast majority of Americans, freedom of speech and freedom of the press is considered part of their birthright, and they do not want to live in an authoritarian country. And we saw that 1 week ago today when they had the No Kings March, which was largely based on there should be freedom of speech, and they were the largest demonstrations in American history. Some say, most people concede there were 5 million, but some say there were 7 million or 8 million people out. So we've never seen that in the United States before. And I do think that for the most part, the news organizations are, and individual journalists are rising to the challenge. I think for many, for the first time, thinking, what is my ethical or moral duty in these times of danger? And the image of the entire Defense Department press corps walking out of the Pentagon in solidarity, refusing to sign on to these phony standards where they could not report anything that was not authorized by the so-called Secretary of War. It really gave me hope, and I see in so many organizations, Radio Free Europe and Radio Liberty, which are fighting for their survival, even though the administration is trying to cut off their money, or public radio, where in cities or towns in America that do not have enough local support to support the stations, people from all over the country are volunteering funds to help keep them alive and broadcasting for their essential finances. So yes, there will be journalists or careerists who will try to curry favor and exchange their integrity for a paycheck. But I think that is not by any means the dominant posture of American journalists today. Rather, American journalists want to continue to inform the public, and the public is hungry for information. At the AP, we find that our fact-checking articles, on the average, get 11 times the amount of traffic of our ordinary articles, because people are hungry to know what is the true story here. So, those are a few examples of how I think we have to respond to threats. These threats we never thought we would have in the United States. We always had this luxurious position compared to other countries, but I think there is some real steel in the spine of journalists in the U.S.
Definitely. Just a very quick follow-up. When you said currying favors with the politicians and with leaders, and do you think that there's a very credible threat to independence? I mean, to independence of the American journalism, even for the legacy institutions that we know. That because in Turkey, again, American exceptionalism is something else, but in Turkey, our experience has been there was a time that the business interests of families and companies who held multiple investments across all the sectors, there was a moment that they decided that there is a new boss in town, and it doesn't seem that he's leaving town. So much for having a media business.
It is a danger. I mean, only in the last half decade or decade have we become familiar with the term media capture, and there is some concern about media capture in the U.S. as these super billionaires and 100 millionaires buy up properties, and they don't have the same allegiance to accuracy, and they are afraid of offending the person sitting in the White House. So I think, I don't want to be Pollyanna. There is some danger of that, but again, I think the heart and soul of journalists is to tell the truth.
Sure. And I will, last but definitely not the least, I will go to Stevan. And one defining aspect of the authoritarian systems is the decay in the sense of agency, people's belief in their own power to change things. And you are the editor-in-chief of Serbian investigative portal KRIK and the Balkan regional editor for the journalism network OCCRP. To me, like for among all of our colleagues around the world, that investigative journalists are producing and working in undemocratic systems are carrying much more weight on their shoulders, since their meticulously reported, deeply researched, and compellingly visualized stories could not always create the well-deserved impact. I lost the count of how many journalists in Turkey and around the region and in other countries who told me that, if I had published the same story in a democratic country, it will topple the government. Here, I don't get any reaction. How come that you can ask me whether I've been successful or impactful? So in that regard, how do you define impact? And how to define, again, measure, in a sense, like, I'm not talking about just numerical metrics, like how do you convince yourself that we should keep doing up this job, and what are the strategies that you prioritize, in a sense that to keep the news readership engaged, because it can be quite depressing to read investigative stories too.
Okay, yeah, that's a difficult question. Thank you. But in a way, I think that especially investigative reporting is very impactful today. It's just more like the way what we see is impact. And I think traditionally, investigative reporters were seeing impact only as did they will provoke some institution to react. And like, so if you publish a story on corruption, organized crime, if you have police, prosecution to react, arrest somebody, you made the impact. If not, you didn't. And I think that's kind of like a little bit old school way of thinking for many reasons. First of all, things change. So now impact is much weaker everywhere, even in Western countries, even, I don't know, in US, we see that there's no impact against Trump, right? So basically measuring impact this way will not work anywhere in these terms. And second thing is, impact is only seen as what like original story will make impact, like the story that is published and printed or on the website. So if we look in this direction, yeah, there's less and less impact. But in a way, how we look at it in KRIK, and I think it could be seen in many other different countries, is that basically this is not like the only way that journalism produces impact, and really the journalism less and less produces impact in terms to pressure state institutions to react, but impact is produced in many other basically levels. And I think that's important, because for me, like, since I started investigative reporting, I was really not so much obsessed with people getting arrested after my stories. Even now, I don't see, like, really the point of investigative reporting to get people jailed. In the way, it's actually publishing story, proving story, and how much the audience this story will reach. This is like basically how I still define it. So I was never really much depressed when I see that we publish stories in Serbia and there's not really reaction. But what I see, so in terms of trust, that if you can see this as impact, that audience have towards our work. And when I say our, it's not just KRIK in Serbia, I think in general, investigative journalism, and if you take NGO-based investigative journalism, I think that the media who are part of this international group, that in general they manage to make brands which audience really trust. And for me, this is the biggest impact you can make as a journalist, that your media's brand itself in a way that when somebody reads your story, it's completely true. And this is like impact, we know. And also impact in investigative journalism, it's like slow process in a way. You don't look at like something that immediately will cause some impact. For instance, in our case, and I believe it's the same case in Hungary, in Georgia, it's like our stories that we published like 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. Now we see that in protest in Serbia, people make banners with this. But we needed 10 years publishing story on corruption and organized crime to kind of become generally accepted. That our government, like for instance, we did so many stories that were proving that our government, our president is tied with organized crime figures. And I remember the first story we did, even our reader is like, maybe this is too much. Nowadays, this is widely accepted fact, nobody dubs about it. And they will not credit us, but we'll see our stories, like so I'm saying, what we did and our colleagues in Serbia, over the years, we managed to build this, I'll not call it narrative. Narrative is basically connected to somebody who wants to manipulate public, but basically we managed to create this idea among citizens that like how much corruption is either, and now there's a protest, so we were one small part of something which I hopefully led to the system be changed. So that's also impact we make. Also, like very important is that what we do in the last previous years, we started doing a lot of reporting on the social media. And it's true that, like for instance, content on website is not advancing much into reaching to greater audience. Mm-hmm. But our content on social media reach more and more audience, and it's like let's say like the same story we publish on the website, where we reach up to 100,000 clicks and viewers. We created in TikTok, basically YouTube video, and we reach like 1 million with the same content. So basically, what we now as an impact, and just not measure story, we also measure basically in general how we communicate with public. We hired new people who just deal with like the new position. We have reporters for social media who basically just produce content for social media, mm-hmm. and in these terms we managed to make a big reach. So this is how I'm looking. It's not like working anyway. You publish story and now there's immediate reaction. We are just part of something which eventually can make change in the end, but everything is more slower and complicated to
as a whole, like
yes.
taking over years and not like immediately.
Yes, because over years you can see how basically what you did 10 years ago, now there's some like emotions you moved like 10 years ago. Now you see actually where it basically reached. So I think like to be less depressed, journalists should like more kind of frame it the way they look at like this, because I think the world is going more in direction when there'll be less this old school impact. Like I publish and state, we are not partners anymore. Investigative journalists and the state institution, even in very well developed democratic countries, I don't think it's the case anymore. Now we are on our own, and it's a different way how we make this impact.
Thank you for saying less depressed, because I will ask a very depressive question, I'm afraid, to Tamar. And when important public figures and journalists and your colleague is arrested, it's very common to have the public galvanized and showing a very strong reaction, but for psychological reasons, for many reasons, that kind of very high attitude, attention, it's very difficult to hold. And in case of intensifying crackdown, do you have any ideas or plans to how to combat news fatigue in your audiences, or political apathy or political disinterest? Because again, I hate to sound like Cassandra, to be a Cassandra here, but if the crackdown and the pressure over independent media goes on a very, very long time and in a very sustained manner, it really affects people's appetite, let's say, to turn on the news. And what are the plans that can be mitigated here?
We've been living in a, let's say, breaking news mode for months now, since not November, maybe since 2023, when this so-called first Russian law was introduced. So this breaking news mode means, high tensions, of course, inside the country, but it also means that people are hungry for information and for reliable information, because in the era of social media and digital media, and especially when your government and the ruling party uses all the resources they have, and they have all the resources in the world to have trolls and bots and fabrics, and to spend lots of money on propaganda, on disinformation, on social media, and use this social media network quite effectively to spread this propaganda. So in this kind of situation, I guess the only strategy independent media outlets and honest journalists may have is honest journalism, to tell the public truth, to continue provide them with reliable information, because they are starving for the information, actually. And there is, I wanted also to reflect on the previous question about the impact. In Georgia's case, for instance, in the past couple of days, we see how they are detaining journalists, and we had one case yesterday when they detained. Actually, before that, in these days, all of the, people who we arrested and sentenced to administrative detention, they were exercising their constitutional right to peaceful protest. But yesterday, they detained one of our colleagues from online media Publica, and this guy, he was covering the protest. He was working there as he was clearly identified as a reporter. So he was since released, of course, but we all perceive these kind of incidents as a sign, as a warning. And actually, it's a warning because this protest somehow leaves, I wouldn't say thanks to media and thanks to coverage, but independent media and coverage of the situation of this protest contributes a lot to the protest. So the government and the ruling party now may start, attacking particularly journalists who are covering this protest, because they think that if there is no picture of arresting, detaining people, or beating them up, this protest will disappear somehow if there will be no coverage. So that's the answer to your question, where our impact lies. That's our impact, actually. That's why everywhere in the world, in Serbia, in Georgia, in Hungary, and in the US even, that's why media is the first target when someone wants to, control the power. Yes.
Thank you so much, Tamar, for that. And going back to Marton, that when you said that we are, as the Hungarian independent media, we are kind of allowed to stay in the game and survive because we are not deemed very harmful, and in a sense that you implied that the content and the outreach, no, actually mostly the outreach of the independent media in Hungary is confined in silos, in a sense that there are audiences that you cannot reach. And I just remembered that I heard the exact same description from a Russian journalist working for Novaya Gazeta 3 years before the Russian invasion of Ukraine, around 2020. He told me, and we were discussing, and I'm like, how Novaya Gazeta still operates in Russia? And he had given me the exact same answer, because they deem us unharmful. And very sadly, things have dramatically changed in Russia for journalists. So what would be, or if you have any example in mind, what would be a story now for the Hungarian independent media to cross the lines and to outreach to audiences who would never, ever even, for example, go online on your publication site?
So there has been a change in the politics, and there has been an awakening on side of the population that we've been lied to. And I really get what Stevan is saying, that there's a moment where our story we published 4 years ago about Orban building a Habsburg state with an orangery, not like Schönbrunn, but
Not here, but
nearly, it was not reaching anyone. They didn't fight the story, because if fighting the story would make it more important, they simply ignored the story. So there were a lot of years that we had this feeling that we are, telling a Hitchcock movie, but only telling the first 45 minutes, never able to end the story.
Yeah.
And then, again, only making our readers more and more frustrated, because a good story needs an ending, and we never had an ending. So we had the good journalism, and we had no impact. Because at the same time, the Hungarian government understood it's not about us, it's about the people who are not reading the news. You have to bring the news, because they are not going to fact check it. Those who go on the AP site to fact check a news, they can't be manipulated. So what they've done was, that they started 1-minute news bulletins, buying up sport televisions and music radios, and bringing the news to people who just want to go home and watch a football match or listen to music in the car, and they hate the news. And yet they get 1-minute news bulletins which are manufactured to constantly hitting the 1-2 narratives the Hungarian government wants. And it is also very much like the Russian narrative. The gender woke Western countries going into their own collapse, while the Hungarian normality is kept up by Orban, and we have the best place to live, and everything is rotten around us, and Vienna is a hellhole. Sure. So they were pushing that notion. And we were not reaching those people. We were having great articles and great investigative pieces about Orban's son-in-law becoming one of the richest guy in Hungary, but somehow not reaching it. And then the bubble bursted. And right now we are in a very strange situation that we also realize that the people who didn't care about the news know about the Habsburg state. They are making jokes about it. So they are not having deep thoughts about it, but they now have an awakening. We've been lied to. Yeah. That's again not a deep understanding of the Hungarian situation, of the Hungarian corruption. It's just a deep feeling we've been lied to. And now, strangely, there's this point where the bubble the Orban government has built and was perfect is now housing a minority of the Hungarian voters.
Yeah.
And they are frustrated because they built a fantastic machinery to keep everyone out and keep their own voters in. But if it's the minority, they're going to lose.
Yeah.
So now they try to penetrate us, use us as toys, to somehow cause chaos in the opposition and win the election. So it's a difficult situation for us right now.
Indeed. And John, back to you. In reference to all these years of tremendous work and contribution you made for the IPI, and since it's the institution celebrating its 75th anniversary, who got founded at Columbia University. I was a Nieman Fellow at Harvard University during the last year of Trump's first term, and at the time there were some American colleagues and some people who were believing that, oh, Trump's presidency is just a glitch in the system and it will go away. When he got elected for the second time, and at the time when I was at Nieman Foundation, we had so many discussions about press freedom advocacy, neutrality, what objectivity means in journalism, and some American colleagues were a bit, I would say, more defensive about discussing stuff, and some of them reached out to me when Trump got elected for a second time, saying that, now I see what you meant about press freedom advocacy. And do you think that it's possible to see a revival? I wouldn't, maybe it won't be right, it won't be correct to call it a revival, but do you expect a strong interest now in the US for press freedom advocacy and defending what we do, not fearing to look like activists, let's say?
First, I'd like to mention just something Martin said about persisting in doing your reporting, and it may not break through on the first day, but I believe it eventually does break through. And I think that's what we have to. We have to exercise persistence, determination to keep fact-based, verifiable journalism alive, because that's what people need to function in this world. And so, yeah, I think there have been a lot of discussions, you know, from the time you were at the Nieman to now, about whether the old standard of objectivity still applies. And what I usually say is objectivity does not mean being unclear about what is the actual facts. Objectivity is approaching any situation or story with an open mind, investigating it, and talking to enough people, gathering enough facts that at the end you can say what is factual and what is true. And so if you start as a reporter from the position of, oh, we have to stop, you know, this and this politician, you're going to lose readers. You're going to lose credibility unless you can actually show the work and why that's true. So I think what I see happening now is a sort of a recommitment to fearlessly reporting facts about what's going on. And there are so many examples. Every day is a new challenge, but I think it was mentioned earlier in this conference, the idea that they could destroy the east wing of the White House and nobody would see it when so many people have cameras now. And how do you keep that from the American people? Well, you can't. I mean, there are enough journalists out there who really want to tell the story, whether it's that, whether it's about the shooting of these drug votes, whether it's about, you know, any of the scandals we're having on a daily basis. I think you soon see reporters reporting on it, and those reports being echoed in social media or spreading by word of mouth, so that people, get an accurate view of it. Now, there are people who are so politically vested in one side or the other that they will refuse to see the truth. But I take hope from what Marton's doing, because he's persisting, and accurate news is getting through.
Thank you so much. I will ask this question to Tamar and Stevan because I think that Hungary, to some degree, has been lucky with the international coverage attention, especially coming from the American legacy media. So that's why that, and Serbia and Georgia. And as we all know, for the American legacy media mostly, and for the European media, in their perspective of international coverage, most of the time it's unspoken. It's subtle, but we understand that when they cover a country's story, once they think that, oh, this kind of things that happen in that country, and the news value they see in reporting about that country sadly diminishes. For both of you, do you think that there is international journalistic attention on your countries? Did they increase or decrease over the years? And if so, does it help to advance the cause of free journalism, or actually it works in countering what you are trying to establish?
I cannot say that, for instance, in our case, in Mzia's case, we lack some international attention, but it's mainly about diplomatic attention. It's mainly about media community and media freedom watchdog organizations that are of great support, and they did huge work in Mzia solidarity and with advocacy campaigns around Mzia. But when it comes to media coverage, of course, this is absolutely different. This is absolutely different, and with so many things happening around the world, with war in Ukraine, with Gaza, with other countries, with Serbian protest, with Hungary, and with the US itself, it's somehow understandable that Georgia cannot be in the spotlight all the time. But there have been, moments, there have been episodes of our fight, our protests, when somehow, Rustaveli Avenue made some kind of global pictures and, appeared in global media outlets. But for instance, it was, maybe you all remember Tindler-Swindler case. This character of this movie was arrested in Batumi just a month ago in Georgia. So that day, despite the fact that we had, so many things going in the country, so many horrible things going in the country, his arrest made headlines everywhere. Even, in New York Times, and even in most, biggest media outlets. And it's an irony, but his case was examined by the judge in Black Sea City, Batumi, who was judge of Mzia Maglobeli. Mm-hmm. This judge sentenced Mzia to 2 years imprisonment, and she was the same judge who sent this guy to 3 months, I guess, imprisonment. He's, I don't know, maybe he's still in Batumi before he's extradited to Germany. So it's also understandable somehow. Many people in Georgia, many of my colleagues and others as well, they think that somehow Western countries, they should have been acted in more timely manner when everything started unfolding in Georgia. And there may be some truth to it, but on the other hand, everyone, I guess, judged with their experiences about Belarus, about Russia, about Kyrgyzstan, where it took quite long, but...
We will hear from Stevan too very shortly, if you may, please, and then go open the floor. I allowed myself some free time, but no, we don't have time for questions. Sorry, we started a bit early, so okay, you have the final word.
Okay, I'll be quick. But I mean, in Serbia, regarding the fact that Serbia is a country in transition and actually negotiation with EU for joining EU, in Serbia, it's seen as extremely important that what's happening in the country has international coverage, especially in EU, US, and the West. Because like now we have fights on two fields. We have a really big protest in Serbia since 1st November last year, when one tragic event happened, when 16 people died. Now will be like 1 year of the protest. And so there's a fight with protests in the country, but also it's believed that other line of fight is actually to lobby in front of EU, actually that our president lose support that he has in EU. That's kind of like two lines. And for this reason, like foreigner press reporting about Serbia is like essential. And what was strange in this case, actually, so for almost a year, there was not actually much of the coverage of what's happening in Serbia in European press. It was like only it happened like a month ago or something like that, because suddenly I started receiving a lot of phone calls, emails from different journalists from Germany, France, whatever. All of them, all of a sudden, I don't know why, but like in the last month or two, they're now calling, and now it really, we can read the stories about and reports about protests in Serbia now in Europe, which I think it's a good thing, and I think it's really hurting our president, because then he's paying this writing, opinion pieces for, I don't know, New York Times. Yeah, so he fighting also there. So basically that just started. I'm not sure why it was so much kind of like little bit like denied for many time, but now finally we have this coverage, and I think it's really important because still press is still influential, and we hope that also it can kind of maybe influence opinions, at least member states or like, I don't know, if European Commission or whatever have also the way how they see situation in Serbia, because unfortunately our president, even being dictator literally, which we can by measure it and prove it, is still seen as somebody pretty legit from the perspective, especially of European Commission, and that's this connection basically there.
Thank you so much. My deepest apology, we don't have any time left for taking questions, but please feel free to approach our esteemed panelists and myself. And thank you so much for IPI for inviting us and hosting this conversation. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you.